So, Berto, I heard through the grapevine that you're really excited that the song from Emilia Perez won the best song at the Oscars. Can you elaborate on that?
Sí, me gusta mucho la canción. Estoy muy emocionado de esta canción.
Yeah. So, what do you think of the movie?
Well, it was really great. I at least a 9. Usually, I might bump it to 11 or 12, but 9 out of 100.
What didn't you like about it?
Okay, so woo, just getting warmed up here. All right, so here's the deal. First of all, I love musicals, but to me, musicals first and foremost have to have good music. The music in this movie was non-existent. There weren't songs. There wasn't music. There was scrunchy, distorted beats with people yelling into a mic. And I didn't like it. The song that won best original song is a nonsense piece in the middle of the movie. The Spanish is clearly not written by a Spanish speaker. It's because like the sentences don't flow nicely, and there is no melody. It's just there's as much melody, I guess, as you can have maybe in a rap, but it's not a rap song. And it also, like, conceptually, the moment in the movie doesn't even make sense because the theme of the song is like, oh, these bad guys, they're finally gonna get theirs. Oh, they're finally all gonna get theirs. And the finally thing that they all get is that they just donate money to a function. Like these are like, think of like the worst of the worst corrupt politicians and oligarchs and stuff, and they're worth millions and millions and millions, and they've done horrible things.
Well, and it's
people,
related
everything.
to the cartels.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're talking about mass murder,
everything, right? And there's a range of people in the audience because some of them are like responsible directly for the murders, some of them are like covering for them, some of them are the judges, the dirty judges, all of it, right? And the song's like, oh, they're finally getting theirs, but again, all that they're doing is that they're at a function where they're going to donate money to a cause. That's all that their comeuppance entails. So the song theme doesn't even make sense. The other thing is this, presumably it was meant to be sort of like a pro-trans movie, I imagine, but it comes off almost as if it was written by someone anti-trans because the theme seems to be like, hey, if you feel like you're in the wrong body, you're probably going to abandon your family just so you can go get an operation. Like, what? No, that's not the point here. And then there's things where, like, we're supposed to all of a sudden feel empathy and bad for the main character, or like for the main character, because she has always felt, she's a woman. But all of a sudden, parentheses, she's a mass murderer. She kidnaps and decapitates and butchers villages but hold on, let's have a moment of empathy because So what if the movie was like, there's this drug kingpin and they discover they have cancer. Oh no, what are we gonna do about that? I don't care. You're a mass murderer. Anyways, I could go on.
I haven't seen it, but I have heard similar takes.
Penis and vagina. That's literally one of the songs.
It's becoming a bit of a meme.
Yes.
It's an Asian guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so switching topics to something more light, a more light topic.
Calming down. Breathing.
I want to give a mild, I don't know if it's a pat on the back or just sort of recognition that two of our biggest deep dives recently are even more relevant today than they ever were.
Oh, yes.
The neo-Nazi deep dive and the Elon Musk deep dive.
Yeah.
When we made those deep dives, I would not have thought that it would be getting... I guess that was the point with the neo-Nazi deep dive that I came to, which is it is getting worse, and it's a lot worse than I thought it was.
Yeah, actually, I almost, like, when we were doing it, I'm like, are we crying wolf here? Are we exaggerating a little? Now I'm like, oh, wow, we totally undersold it.
Yeah. And then the Elon Musk deep dive. And there was some overlap in the Elon Musk deep dive. But boy, has there ever been.
Yeah. And then with the Elon Musk thing, what's interesting is a lot of the things we discussed, you brought up some hypotheses based on what we know, and then we discussed, and we even had some empathy for like how someone with that kind of trauma could operate in this world and stuff. And then what subsequently happened is just played out in front of our eyes, like just reemphasizing, wow, what a painful existence this person must be living, and makes it painful for the rest of us.
Yeah, this relates to something I've been venting or yelling about for many, many years, that, and you're not referencing this specifically, but it's a theory that I think a minority of observers have, including myself, that when you look at far-right people, charismatic leaders, Joe Rogan, these kind of people, and for sure a lot of people would say Joe Rogan isn't far-right, but whatever you call him, right, the things that he promotes is very clear to me motivated by an interaction with the audience. That when the audience and the charismatic individual interface, you have two completely different points of view coming at them. One's very supportive, and the other one is vitriolic. And in all likelihood, at least in the beginning, completely unfairly vitriolic. Like we reviewed line by line, almost hour by hour, what happened to Elon Musk during the Thailand kids incident. And those kinds of events are what I believe to be the germinating incident that cascades into the monsters that they produce. This has happened over and over and over again. And there's a lot of smaller figures in the media landscape, podcasters, YouTubers, who you can point to as having more moderate, maybe they were center-right or something. And because of the internet landscape and the echo chamber and the ridiculous nature of which nearly everyone responds to anybody these days, it radicalizes either direction, honestly. And I've been screaming about that for a long time. It's these individuals are a problem for sure, but let's not contribute to pushing them further down the road by just unbridled vitriolic attacks as a mob. Criticize in a calm and respectable way, for sure. I mean, you have to speak up. But to go after them personally and to assume things, to look at a Reddit post that makes an accusation and just going with it without looking into yourself, well, this is what you get.
Yeah.
So I think that that's exactly what we're seeing with Elon Musk. And there seems to be, some reckoning with the reality of it. It's one thing to say, give me the reins of government. It's another thing to have the reins.
There was a South Park episode that did this brilliantly. This is before they stopped. This is when they were still parodying like the Trump stuff, before they actually declared that they were done parodying politics because reality had become more absurd than they could possibly ever write, which is very telling. But there was an episode where Cartman is like this Rush Limbaugh figure, and he's like demanding change because he's always complaining about the school and the student council, and Wendy Testaberger is the head of the thing. And he finally convinces everyone that he should be in charge. So they put him in charge. And then, of course, once he's in charge, he doesn't know what the hell to do, and everything starts going to hell. Yeah. It's very interesting. I don't know. I don't know how we're going to land out of this, but
we won't. Let's just drop it.
Yeah.
Middle tier patron, anonymous patron, she says, "Hey, Dr. Kirk and Berto, I recently reconnected with a childhood friend that I haven't spoken to in many years. The reason why we started talking again was because I noticed she was posting how she was happy Trump won the election on social media.
Oh.
I was confused because I didn't really expect her to be a right-wing person, but her family is. Mm-hmm. I reached out to her to see how somebody could think this way, and I approached it in a way of genuinely wanting to understand, which is true. I was genuinely wanting to understand. We spoke a bit, and I was surprised by some of her ideas, like trans people in bathrooms, her views on immigrants being a problem, and thinking Trump isn't racist or sexist. We went back and forth. It didn't get ugly, and I tried to explain my point of view on things. We ended up talking about a different topic, about why we stopped being friends. It isn't an important story. It happened a while back. And in response to this, she gave me a super thoughtful and meaningful apology.
Oh.
And I decided to accept her apology and offered her my friendship. We have hung out a couple of times, but I'm having a hard time accepting that she believes such harmful things that directly affect people in my life. I wanted to show her that not all liberals will yell at her for having these views, but I'm worried about having someone close to me who goes against so many issues I hold dear. She isn't mean and doesn't force her ideas on me, but I am unsure how to deal with our friendship, her misguided views, and not wanting to force ideas on her. My therapist says I shouldn't try to change her mind, and I should just accept that some friends will think differently. But how does that work when someone's views go against things so important to you? How do you deal with a friend who thinks these things? Berto? How do you deal with Chong?
Well, I look back when one of my best friends voted for George Bush twice. George Bush, W, right? So voting for Bush once, I'm like, okay, I wasn't even really into politics at the time. I was just like, I don't know, it seems like Al Gore maybe got stolen. But okay, fine. But then the war happens, and then everything's like, what? And then this person, one of my best friends, voted for him again. And I remember having, vigorous debates at the time. But, I still at the end, I was like, well, all right. Well, just difference of opinion, but we're still friends. Everything's cool. I did, on the other hand, sour one of my relationships. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. And this was with a different friend, a friend from high school. And he, I don't know if he still is, but at the time was in the Navy. He was a chaplain in the Navy. And I hadn't seen him in years. And then we got together for a dinner. We were having a great time. We were discussing things. And then the topic of politics came up, and it was, I was going off on Bush and blah, 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 about the war, all these things. He got somewhat defensive, but also wanted to just not discuss it because he was like, look, that's in my chain of command. That's my, whatever, commander in chief or whatever. So I don't really want to talk about it. And I'm like, I kept going, and I pushed and pushed. And finally, that evening did not end well. He said, you know what, I think we're done. And then that was the end of the dinner, and it was the end of our friendship, which I deeply regret because I wasn't trying to do that, and if I could take it back and somehow find him, because I haven't been able to find him, I would actually apologize, be like, you know what, I took it too far. That said, I'm now at a point that's different. I'm at a point where I am starting to feel like I ask myself the question, let's take politics out of the thing. Let's say I'm friends with someone and they light my house on fire. Right. And they didn't mean to. I'm like, dude, you burned my house down. That's incredible. And they're like, dude, it's what it is. Like, well, wait a minute. Well, I didn't mean to, but houses burn. But wait, you burned my house. Then I get another house, and then they go and burn it again. And this time they do it on purpose.
Maybe a more accurate analogy using this metaphor is that they are putting your house at risk severely by having bonfires that could result in burning down your house. And, it could happen.
Okay, fair enough.
And you keep telling them.
So the first time they do the bonfire, and they didn't know, but it does catch fire. My house burns down. This is the pandemic, right? Oh, shoot. Okay. I buy a new house. They move in next door. They're having bonfires again. And now the house is catching fire. And I'm like, dude, you're doing it. At this point, I think I'm done with that person. So I'm starting to ask myself, what is my limit for folks that support things that are 180 degrees antithetical to my worldview, to the things I care about? And I don't know. I'm starting to reach my breaking point. That said, there are different categories of people. I just had a discussion yesterday, just a text exchange. There's a category of person that when the topic came up, their point of view is F the government. I don't give a F about all these people. Yeah, they should fire all the feds. They're all corrupt. I don't care. Like basically, they just want to live in the Wild West. Like less than the Wild West, because there were actually still rules in it. And I just can't relate to that, right? I'm like, you know what? I don't think I can go down.
Well, it's fucking idiotic.
Yeah.
Because if that happened, 90% of us humans would starve or die.
Right.
Healthcare would fall apart.
So that's a perspective that I'm like, I guess I'll reply to your question if you send me a text message, but that's about the extent of my relationship with you. Yeah. There's another category, which is, in fact, I know people like this that are close in my life that I guess they've been brainwashed over 30, 40 years, and they actually think that all of what's happening is necessary because of these deep evils in the world, blah, blah. And I can't just cut them out of my life because they're meaningful, they're family members, things like that. Yet we've reached a point where we can't really see eye to eye on any of this stuff, right? So, but there's a different category. I'm not going to cut them off, but we can't really see eye to eye. I've tried, it doesn't seem to work. And so, yeah, I guess it varies for how meaningful, how important is that relationship to you? How dependent are you on that relationship? And also on your personal level of like, what's your breaking point?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's been a question that's been posed to us over the last 8 years pretty intensely, but it's been a question that's been around since before we were born. Yeah, it's not new. I think it can feel more intense right now, but it's always been intense. You talk about how you weren't into politics in 2000 when George W. ran against Gore. I was. I had been well into politics for many years. By that point, I was protesting and in the streets when I was 19 years old.
Like, I'm sure I didn't vote that year. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I did.
I voted. I have voted every single. I've voted in every single election that there has been, and there's mostly local elections, but I know that I have voted every single time. Primaries, right. Little measures locally, I've participated in caucuses and I've raised money. I've donated money to politicians, right. local politicians. Anyway, so it's a big deal to me, and it's always been a problem, the viewpoints and the arguing and the upsettedness and the relationships falling apart. But I'll tell you that right now, for me, I don't have to deal with it hardly ever because I can maybe count on one hand, maybe less, how many people that I know that are even remotely close to me who I am either suspicious or know that they voted for Trump or are not devout Democrats.
Like me. I voted for
Trump. So it's not a question that I have to ask myself very often. But when I do, I try to put things in perspective. If I like someone and I think that they're a good person and they are being swayed by aspects of the Republican ticket that are not atrocious, are not genocidal, and are not the kinds of things that are the worst of their points of view, then, that's different, right? And that's the way it's always been.
That's how it used to be.
Whereas there are people that are absolutely on my side of the fence, but the way they talk about politics annoys the fuck out of me. And I just don't want to get into it. I just avoid. Yeah. Even though we completely agree on everything and we vote the same, I'm just like, I just can't even stand. You might even know who I'm talking about. Sure. There are people that I just don't even. As soon as they open their mouth, I'm already rolling my eyes, and I'm just like, God damn, get me out of here. Right. In fact, there are people that I know voted for Trump. Friends, mutual friend, one mutual friend of ours that I would much rather talk to than some of my liberal friends. Now, having said that, 95% of my friends who are liberal, of which 99% of my friends are liberal, they all have a similar way of talking about it, which is, not annoying in any sort of way. And, there's little bits and pieces that you talk about. You don't over dinner, go wholeheartedly into the topic and debating for hours. You just have a little bit of grumbling or a joke here and there or a viewpoint or something. And then you talk about something else, the way it's always been. What I will say to you, middle tier anonymous patron, is in the current landscape, the one thing I will not abide is liberals attacking other liberals for being friends with non-liberals. For us liberals to be activists, to vote, to speak out, to criticize is a choice and perhaps the calling, perhaps moral. To attack a single individual, particularly a liberal, for just having a friend who didn't vote for the liberal politician is, I think, bullying the wrong person. It doesn't help, I don't think. It's not fair. It's not their fucking fault. And it's thought policing. It's friend policing. And it's not okay. And it has to fucking stop. Middle tier anonymous patron didn't say this. Mm-hmm. She's not saying, I'm worried about being friends with this person that I've been friends with for a long time. She apologized. We made up. We're good friends. And I want to remain friends. That's what my heart says. But my head is saying, but how do I be friends with someone that has a different point of view? And she's not saying this, but I wonder if she's also wondering about, does that make her a bad person? Does it socially make her a pariah? Is she part of the problem if she's not constantly, browbeating everyone about politics,
Yeah.
And what I would say to that is everyone is free to make their own choice about that. And nobody should be attacking people like her.
And then I'm going to say there is always a line. For example, if you rewind the clock, I think it would probably be very right to make the same argument in 1935, 37 or whatever. Like, oh, I'm friends with someone in Hitler's party. It's like, oh, that's cool, right? If you're like, what? You should never be friends with it. Like, that'd be bad. By 1945, probably like, nope. I don't want any friends that are friends with people, because at that point you're basically endorsing what's going on, right? So similarly, I think anyone that, first election, I actually had, not only did I have zero problem with being friends with people during the first 4 years, I was always online trying to Facebook message and have these arguments. Eventually I quit Facebook, but I was. And because I was specifically trying to preserve the relationship and see if I could could we see eye to eye? All right. Now I definitely gave up on that. But now I'm looking at it like, okay, well, I'm still not cutting off friendships unless, like I said, reduce interaction with people that seem completely far gone. But there is a line. We invade Canada, we start shooting them, killing them and stuff. And if someone I know is still supporting that, goodbye Yellow Brick Road. You know what I mean? So there's always going to be a line, but I don't know where that line is. There's some obvious lines, but right now we're in murky territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say is that if you listening right now want to not be friends with someone based on their politics, that is absolutely your choice. Yeah. You can make that choice, and no one can thought police you for that. But no one can thought police another person for being friends with who they're friends with. But anyway, so Berta, let's take a break. When we get back, more emails. I promise the next one will be extremely light. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. So this next email is from listener Emily from Toronto. She wrote in and said, "Hi, Dr. Kirk and Humberto. I appreciated your recent rerun, Toxic Masculinity Debate, the rerun from 2019. Berto,
yeah.
I recently had reviewed this episode for rerun and sent it to you.
Yeah.
And so Emily is saying, I appreciated your take regarding approaching women on the street in that episode. The experience for women that you didn't get into is the process of having to let the person down. This is a big challenge because you have to let them down easy. Otherwise, you might get called a bitch, but you also might have to be firm. Otherwise, they will debate you. Oh, I see. For example, you might say, I have a boyfriend, and they will say, well, where is he now, etc. It's the back and forth and the fact that in this exchange, you become responsible for their feelings. You now have to be nice or else expect or else you need to expect to be called a bitch or told that you're ugly anyway. It becomes uncomfortable and potentially unsafe if the man feels embarrassed or disrespected. And also, if you're in public, the woman doesn't get to decide when the interaction ends. For instance, if it happens on the metro, you may have to interact with this person for 10 stops. There are people who you may want to talk to or be interested in approaching you for sure, but a lot of the time it's not welcome, it's not respectful, and it makes the woman feel watched and uncomfortable. End of email. Berto, what do you think?
I'm sure I'm about to make all my same friends again. I mostly stand by my original standpoint on this. I think humans for a million years have had to approach other humans for mating. Now, there's a whole bunch of complications with it. Everything this person says is right. Like, it is dangerous out there for women mostly, and that's true, and that sucks. I still don't know, though, because like I have a friend, one of my good friends who's a woman and a gal. She has a terrible time with dating, and she mostly just dates through the apps. She goes through the apps and she swipes and she goes on dates and then she dates someone and then she's always whining and complaining to me about it and always asking for advice, and the poor thing can't seem to find Mr. Right. Okay, and I keep advising her that she should just, in addition or instead of, but at least in addition to the dating apps, get involved with activities, go out and meet people in the real world and all these things. But if I give her that advice and no one approaches her because everyone's afraid of approaching her, then I guess never mind.
Yeah, but again, it's black and whiting it.
Well, no, but both sides are black and whiting it.
No, my point that I've always been making, and what she is saying too, particularly here at the end, she's saying there are people who you might want to talk to or be interested in approaching you for sure. The point is empathy, as you're exhibiting right now. Yeah. 10 years ago, and a lot of men right now, what Emily is talking about right now, for a lot of guys, they wouldn't have ever considered that.
Sure.
So for 99% of guys who are not psychopathic and have empathy, if they listen and they incorporate that into their decision making, then there will be less harm to women.
No disagreement with any of this.
There will be at times when they will be in a context or they'll see a look on her face or maybe even just kind of the way she's carrying herself, certain ways that you might look. I mean, who knows? There's like little cues. And you might approach in a way that allows for her to back out very easily. You know what I mean? You just have that empathy. You have that thought in your mind. You might not have ever experienced that before as a guy, those kinds of pressures, those kinds of annoyances, those kinds of fears. And once you hear that, then you consider it. And when in doubt, there might be scenarios like outside of a 7-Eleven, like in that commercial, where you're just like, there's not enough, and there's not enough indication that this is going to go well, and there is some indication that this is going to be bad for her, and really bad for me, because what's the point? And so maybe I shouldn't do that right now.
Yeah, and I saw, my best friend who's no longer with us, literally do that multiple times and get a girlfriend for at least several months.
And he probably was good at detecting when not to do it.
Maybe. Yeah.
He was not an idiot.
He's also a good-looking guy.
But he also wasn't an idiot.
Well, and he didn't approach them rudely, and he didn't,
Exactly. He had empathy.
Right, but that's why my original debate was like, we assumed that the guy in the commercial was going to be a douche. And I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
This is the black and white.
I'm not saying you. I said we.
Who's we?
The people debating that the people saying that it was right for the other dude to stop him. And I was saying, like, dude, that's a little rude. You don't know that he was going to be a douche about it. Like, actually, I hate that word. Sorry. You don't know that he was going to be a jerk about it. So we don't know. So I guess the black and white goes both ways. We don't know.
I think that you are very different today than you were 6 years ago when we recorded that episode.
Definitely.
Yeah. But you said at the beginning of this that you agree with most of what you said.
I still believe that it was a little excessive. That scene was excessive.
Yeah. But I think you would, if we suddenly were to talk about a similar thing today, I think you would have, I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but I would think you would approach it somewhat differently.
Probably. But I also want to clarify, like everything you said about like, it's all about empathy. You should be aware. You shouldn't like, and then, cause like a lot of these fears of like, well, what if I say no and then they're a jerk? Yeah. We have this problem where we none of us learn any of this, by the way.
Right.
So like, and I'm not here crying me a river for guys. I'm just saying, I didn't learn this. No one I know learned this.
Right. And so when women talk, listen.
Yeah, but also women didn't learn anything either. Like they were also not taught anything.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest problems we have is like, we got to start teaching kids from the start empathy and proper relations with others, not just like intense relations. I mean, just even how do you meet someone? How do you approach someone? And forget just even romantically, just like, because there's all these norms and you assume people, kids just kind of watch others. Well, guess what? That's how we learn. And when we're growing up, we watch others go on the street and say jerky things to women. And then you're like, oh, I guess that's what I'll do.
Or a lack of a healthy model alternative.
Right.
For sure. All right. Let's take a break. When we get back, okay, the next email will truly be a light email. What do you say?
Okay.
All right, we're back from the break. Okay, this next email, anonymous patron. She says, I was recently listening to an old episode of yours on Elliot Rodgers.
Oh, God. Fool me once.
Where you discussed the importance of our society refraining from glorifying and giving excessive attention to mass shooting perpetrators in the media as a way to help prevent these tragedies. Just chiming in. Yeah, it's a well-understood social phenomenon and journalistic ethics guideline to, one, at the very least, you don't release their manifesto because that's exactly what they were hoping.
Right.
Especially if it was essentially a mass murder suicide situation, like Elliot Rodgers. And maybe you don't even publicize their name or their picture. At the very least, you don't plaster it all over the place and you don't put it on Time magazine so that everyone can drool over the Boston bombing kid because he's a hottie or something. You just don't do that. It's not inherently immoral, right? You're a journalist, you're reporting on something, but if you're trying to make the world a better place. And,
by the way, this just happened with the guy that killed the insurance company.
Right. So, so she's getting that.
Yeah.
Going back. It's been a little over 10 years since that episode was released. And from my perspective, not much has changed in the media. The recent shooting involved the United Healthcare CEO is case in point. Even though I actively choose to ignore that type of content on social media, my feed and explore pages have been flooded with posts and images of the perpetrator. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you feel there's been any meaningful progress in this area? What is your perspective on the amount of attention the United Healthcare case and perpetrator have received in the media? End of email. Berto, are you purposely not saying his name right now?
I don't remember his name.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I think you live in a different echo chamber.
No, I'm terrible with names across the board.
Oh, okay.
Like just the other day, I was trying to remember the name of one of the characters, Xander from Buffy, and I couldn't remember it. So anyways.
Okay. So what do you think, Berto? Do you think there's been any meaningful progress? And what do you think about the attention to the United Healthcare CEO murderer?
So
alleged murderer.
Right. I don't think meaningful. I definitely, obviously in the last decade or whatever, I remember in different shows, but especially shows I follow, which might be just a little more ethical, that where they'll specifically say like, I'm not going to say the name, I'm not going to show the photo. But they were in the minority, because if it bleeds, it leads, right? So it's all over plastered. In this case, the last thing I saw was any restraint, and they had all the photos, and then they looked up all the Instagram photos, and then everyone's talking about it. Well, look at his chest and all these things. Absolutely, it was all over the place. And then, unfortunately, this was really fascinating because you take a topic that is very important and serious, which is the unethical behavior of insurance companies, and then you attach this murderer, right? And then now all of a sudden the murderer gets glorified, right? And it is a very unhealthy feedback loop for our society.
What sort of feedback loop?
That basically if we don't like something and then someone does something violent and final about it, we glorify that, right? And we're not talking about...
two bads don't make it good.
Correct. Yeah. Two bads do not make it good. Because there's a big difference between... I think anyways, there's a big difference between our army or our military finally went and defeated the army that was killing us and they started the conflict, right? I think that personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with glorifying that because it was a self-defense situation, right? But what we're talking is that, like, yes, systemically, it's a problem that these things. That doesn't mean people can put on the little Batman suit and start murdering people. That's not the society we want to live in.
Well, and if you grew up in the United States and had a bit of a sheltered life, like I did, but aren't aware of what can happen in a society otherwise, it can feel like, yay, we got one of them. But you came from a society that politically and in terms of security and safety and police norms and corruption, when you go tit for tat, it consumes a society.
This is exactly what I mentioned in the previous segment that I was talking to a person I know that they're kind of cheering on the chaos going on in the government right now. And I was explaining this to them. I said, look, I've lived in that chaos. It's not good. You never feel safe. Anything you know can be taken overnight. If someone you don't like gets killed, you might cheer that. Well, the next day they're going to kill someone you did like. And there's no stopping it. And you have no power. So yeah, I guess that's a good point that we live in a society that's been very lucky in that sense.
Yeah.
And so we think that one-off is like, yeah, the insurance companies got that. First of all, this affected the insurance companies zero. Like, no regulation was passed whatsoever about anything, right? And the people that were suffering potentially from that company, they're not suffering less. Okay.
For sure, yeah. I'm not saying that this is a viable activist action. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I will say, as someone that has been dealing with United Healthcare for 25, 30 years and has been, I have been dealing with them and have had some venting support with colleagues occasionally. And maybe I'll read an article that will out United Healthcare, but it'll be very back page of the newspaper kind of a thing. For me to suddenly hear everyone talking about how shitty United Healthcare is, John Oliver and soccer moms and my parents and everyone talking about, wow, there's something going on. I mean, it did cause, at the very least, extreme awareness of something.
Right. So, like, here's the kind of stuff that I think is great. You go into a museum in France that's where the painting's protected by glass, and you spill paint on the glass, and everyone's like, "Oh my God!"
Or tomato soup, wasn't it soup?
They're defacing famous art. Well, first of all, they didn't ruin anything permanently, so you could even argue like maybe they need to go further. But at the very least, it was all over the news. Okay, great. If you break the number one law in the society, and now if you're going to break the law, which is murder, if you're going to break that law, then and it's supposed to be like okay, then we're probably at the point of revolution is what we're talking about. Because anything before that, I still need to live in a society where no, you actually can't just go grab a mission, license to kill on anyone you want. So on top of, to make it all worse, that company got a whole bunch of sympathy from half of this country. Why? They deserve no sympathy. The company isn't even involved because it was just some individual. They replaced them in 2 seconds.
Yeah. Historians, I'm a mini amateur historian, so I can go into at least my limited historical knowledge of analogous events, even in the history of the United States. We had events like this, many events like this that have been lost to history, some more prominent than others as we were heading into the Civil War. And there were white people who were fighting against slavery in the United States, were killing and putting their lives at risk and resulting in them being executed or killed in the action of domestic terrorism as they're trying to free millions and millions of enslaved people.
You're right. There is a line.
And those actions can be argued having greatly contributed to the motivation of the North to push back to such an extent that resulted in the Civil War, which resulted in a lot of people dying.
Yeah. No question.
That freed millions and millions of black people.
So I can't disagree that there is a line somewhere. There is a line at which I myself will take up an arm and go and kill someone. That line exists, and it's necessary, sadly, in this universe we live in. I don't know if this was that line.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at it narrowly, it's health insurance, and it's just one of the private health insurances in the United States. But it represents all of the health insurance problems. It represents the refusal of half of this country to even consider a single payer option or any kind of option that involves taxes that isn't pro-profit. You know what I mean? It also represents the pushback. And again, I'm not justifying it. I came out immediately after the event and talked about my experiences with United Healthcare. And I talked about it, a lot in a episode. And in that episode, I started off by saying, it is not okay to murder. This is a fact. It's obvious. Having said that, it also is a galvanizing event that galvanizes people across various different political beliefs that greed and corporate boardrooms have been getting out of control.
Yeah. And
it is not for the people, of the people, by the people. It's for the corporations, by the and this is an example of that. And it's a very stark example. When you have companies like Amazon or something that are raping the world or something, or exploiting workers, these are bad things, but it's hard to put it into something that's visceral. When you have United Healthcare that is denying coverage at times, and some of that denial of coverage is resulting in some deaths, literal people dying because the healthcare insurance advertised something to a customer of their health insurance that they did not follow through on, and someone ends up dying, then it's visceral. And it's the corporate greed actually resulting in something that you can point to, an individual case where someone has died because someone wanted their stock price to go up by 0.0001%. That is a fact. It happens all the fucking time.
Yep.
And this represents that.
Yeah. And by the way, individually, there's a billion examples of individuals that were wronged by a company or a person, and they went and killed or severely injured or whatever, where if I look at it as an individual case, it's still illegal, but I'd be like, man, I think in their shoes, I probably would have done the same. I don't know the full story with this one. I don't know what his whole background was. I heard a little bit here and there. So therefore I can't say if I had been in his shoes, whether I would have done the same or not. So I'm not even judging I would never do it. It's more about, and you might be right. I'm actually, you're not saying that, but someone could be right. This is the line, right? I don't know. I also don't know that this was effective, sadly. It was effective temporarily. You're right. People talked about it, but I don't know. But there is a line. I maybe modify what you said a little bit. I do think sometimes you have to murder, but I don't know that this was that line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one more email, and I promise
this one is easy.
This one's a little.
I trust you now because, we got a good track record.
Yeah. Anonymous patron, she says, first, I want to say that as someone who cannot afford therapy, your podcast has been my oasis. Thank you, really. Second, I want to hear your insight on becoming frugal with love as we experience more in life. I have noticed that the older I get, the less giving I have become. There are fears of being taken advantage of again, fears of being seen as nothing more than another nice Asian girl, and of course, the financial strain. So just chiming in here, I feel like I want to read this again. I have noticed the older I get, the less giving I've become. There are fears of being taken advantage of again, fears of being seen as nothing more than another nice Asian girl, and of course the financial strain. Okay, I think she's referring to some individual specific experiences. I remember being more generous in the past, and now I feel like the more I experience, the more selfish I become. I have a hard time unconditionally dedicating myself to the happiness of others. Is this a common challenge? And is this something people can change? I'm curious to hear your take. Berto, what do you think?
This one hits close to home because, well, yeah, the as we've discussed before,
You're an Asian girl?
I am an Asian girl, and so no, I've had a lot of periods, like waves in my life of this situation where my relationship with giving, especially giving money or help in other ways, what I both gave it freely, but also I almost felt that it was a way to like show that I loved and therefore be loved, and it bit me a lot. I loaned huge sums of money to close relatives that I never saw again. And so over the years, I definitely had to start changing and be like, whoa, no, I just can't give my money away like this just because someone's like, I need this thing. And even smaller behaviors, but that they would add up. Like we've talked about this too. I would be at a bar full of mostly strangers. Maybe I have a couple friends there or whatever. And I'm just feeling generous that day. So I'm like, I'm just going to buy shots for all these. I spend like $1,000 all of a sudden for no reason. Right. And people sometimes do that in the movies, but like this was just because, and it wasn't even money I had. I'm not a billionaire. I don't have like $1,000 to burn. So I had to like kind of process that. And so nowadays I do feel some of these feelings of like, oh, I got to be a little more guarded. I don't want to be taken advantage of. I don't want to, and also there is a financial burden if you just give all your money away and things like that. So I can relate to that. I don't feel it makes me stingy by any means. I am still far from a stingy person. But certainly if someone met me now versus, 15 years ago, and they were out and about with me, they might notice a difference.
Well, yeah. Would you say your giving in the past was truly unconditional or truly from the core of you? It was like something that you wanted to do purely for generosity's sake, or
no. I mean, so there were layers, of course, but no. I think it was a lot of it, not all of it. A lot of it was a wound-based thing where it was fear-based, reactionary-based. Yeah, like the thing where I'm like, I'll pay for everyone here or whatever. Those kinds of things, I think, were me wanting to be loved, right? Also, same thing with like, oh, my close relative who I look up to needs money. Oh, great. Here, have all of this, right? But there was a flip side, which was, it was also like trust, and in life, sometimes you don't know that someone's going to defraud you,
Yeah. Well, also, I don't think I'd ever thought about this, but you were very connected because, you were in Colombia for a good portion of your childhood until you were 15. So you were very connected to a lot of people in Bogota who didn't have the kind of opportunities that anyone could have.
Right.
If they were in the States, some of these people that I know that you're talking about would have been financially fine.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're in an economy that is different, it's harder. And at the time that you were shelling out a lot of money, you didn't have kids yet.
Right.
And you were still young. We're talking 25 to 35. And what do you need that money for? It's even in your own mind, you're thinking, well, whereas now it's like kids and college
there's
and
that very different,
healthcare and your own aging issues.
That's right.
And when you're 30 years old and you're like, well, I have the extra money and they could really use this, and so I'll give it to them. But this is sort of off the point of what we're talking about, but it just occurred to me how old you were at the time.
That is a huge factor for sure. And though, as you were saying, these cases weren't all about. There was another case where I'm at the W, one of those
a club lounge place.
Yeah, where my friend Mitch is playing and stuff, and I'm sitting there and I'm talking to someone that's kind of a mutual friend in that community, and they're just talking about this movie they're trying to make. They're not asking me for money, and I'm like, "Ooh, how much money do you need?"
Yeah.
And then I just literally just made a check for a huge amount of money with zero guarantees, and I lost all of it.
Yeah.
And why? Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, the surface level thing is like, great, I want to be an investor in movies. I could become rich out of this.
Did you write a check literally that night?
Well, no, but like 2 days later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Your spending addiction.
Yeah.
And your attempts to try to get love, your attempts to be liked.
Yeah.
Your also trying to signal against your childhood label of being a poor person.
That's right.
And
I'm not poor. I can invest in whatever I want anytime I want.
Right. Let me show you.
Yeah.
You know, you would talk about how you would go into an upscale clothing store, and you would imagine that the salesperson, you would imagine the salesperson would judge you as someone that couldn't buy, and even if you didn't want the items, you would buy it on this fantasy that you're showing them.
Like, oh yeah, you don't even. Do you know who I am? Do you know I'm kind of a big deal?
You say Pretty Woman, but I think about the Pretty Woman episode of It's Always Sunny where Sweet D and
Frank.
Yeah, Frank's partner / sex worker are in that boutique, and the sex worker pulls out this wad of cash. Anyway, it's hilarious. I think that's the episode where Sweet D hits her head on the car and actually like broke her neck. Anyway, the actual actress, like,
for real?
Yeah. She was supposed to. She's supposed to be running out of the store, like, because her credit card got denied or something, and she's just like, "Yeah, psych," and then she runs out. And the actress, Caitlin Olsen, was supposed to trip and just kind of fall, and then a stunt person was gonna fall and run into the car, but she went a little hard, and she just pogos right into the.
Oh my God!
And dents the car door.
Oh no!
But she keeps the bit going. Watch it on YouTube.
Okay.
There's clips all over the place,
and like she hit her neck,
and she broke, or she did something. She had an injury. Yeah. And it is not surprising because she and you can clearly see that's Caitlin Olsen. That's not a stunt person.
Oh my God!
but you know, and she laughs about it now. But anyway, so getting back to this email, anonymous patron, you ask, is this a common challenge? I would say not specifically in my anecdotal experience, but it is very common for people to experience burnout in general in terms of empathy and compassion and generosity, or giving emotionally, right? But it's also very common for people to suddenly realize that they've never really given willingly to people. And this is sort of your category, Berto.
Right.
That they suddenly realize, like, wait, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. I don't know if I ever wanted to do it. I think I was doing it out of fear.
Yeah.
I was not doing it out of generosity. I consciously thought I was doing it out of generosity, but I wasn't prioritizing anything of myself.
Right.
I was completely sacrificing myself. So that's not actually giving. That's fear generosity, which isn't actual generosity. You know, it's your own anxieties, your own traumas are backing you into a corner with a gun to your head saying, you better fucking give, and you're giving. No one's doing that to you. It's trauma that's doing it to you. So the other question you ask is, can it change? And the answer is absolutely. It's natural for us to give, you know, but it's very hard to give when you're hurt or burnout or you have trauma or no one is giving to you. Like, there's no balance. So my best guess is, based on your email, because, you know, you're referring to as an Asian girl. I don't know what exactly you're referring to, but I think in context you are talking about your requirement to sacrifice. Not only women in general around the world on average, but also particularly Asian women. And you can't, and particularly in some Asian cultures, because of course we're talking about East Asian cultures, we're talking about like 45% of the population of the planet, of which there are literally, you know, thousands and thousands of cultures. But I wouldn't be surprised if you come from an East Asian culture where it is very common for women. And also, you know, if you come from one of the East Asian countries, of which there are many that have experienced a lot of war and famine and refugee movements, a lot of atrocities, particularly by the Japanese, which I will disavow because my people had left Japan well before World War.
It wasn't me.
Well before the 30s. Although I do have like a great grandma who and her people. There's a generation that goes back to occupiers of Manchuria and Korea.
Oh wow.
There's pictures, and it's known that because Japan had invaded China and Korea decades and decades before World War II, and had been occupiers anyway. And so you would send settlers for jobs and da-da-da. And when they took it back in World War II, it's thought that my distant relatives were probably murdered or something, or rounded up or something. Anyway, but if you come from one of those countries, or really anywhere in the world, places like Poland, for example, areas in the continent of Africa, then you come from parents or grandparents, or even going back generations, where you didn't have the luxury, anyone didn't have the luxury to think about themselves. You had to sacrifice, you had to give, you had to work together. If you had extra food and someone in your family didn't have any food, you had to give. There had to be this, like, you can't be selfish. There's no room for that. People will die otherwise.
I see, you're right.
And that ethic just gets passed down. And so you'll have kids that are living in middle-class lives, maybe even their parents as well. In the United States, it's the only sort of thing that's akin to this is at least my parents, because your family's from Colombia, but my parents had parents who went through the Great Depression.
Right.
And so
that austerity feeling.
Right. So my parents came of age in the 50s and 60s when there was a lot of abundance. And yet they would be told to conserve, if you have one of those cookie tins and you eat all the cookies in it, you got to use that cookie tin for something, because what if you need that cookie tin? There's this, you don't throw anything away that could be used, because you never know, right? Yeah. And if you come from some of these other parts of the world, it's way worse than that. So you can have these cultural mandates, again, particularly if you're a woman, that it's not even like a basis for reality that you would ever think about yourself. So when you're giving, you're not choosing to give. And you might be labeled as generous, and you might think of yourself as generous. And I'm not talking about money necessarily. It also could be love and
time, attention, the whole thing,
helping someone. And so it's very common for people, regardless of what culture you come from, to, at some point in your adult life, to suddenly realize, wait, I don't know if I can give anymore, and I don't know if I want to. And have I ever give all the generosity, all the giving, all the effort? Have I ever chosen to do this? And this realization comes often when the individual has the safety to even ask that question. So it's evidence of having already progressed, or context or something. They've done their work, they're in therapy or something, where they're now able to even ask the question. And then you start to wonder, well, I don't even know if I've ever given from my own free will, and I don't know if I ever want to give now, because it just feels like, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then it can feel like, with age, do people get frugal with love? And the answer is not inherently, but you might be entering into a phase of which, if you do the work and you figure it out and you have enough given to you, you might have to reconfigure your relationships and whatnot and the way you approach giving, that on the other side of that, you will have the capacity to give in a way that you might not have, or very rarely given before, where you purely are giving from a place of abundance in your soul, which might be completely different. For you, Berto, I don't know where you are on that journey. Through various other conversations we've had, I think you probably have been in that third phase for a long time, but I don't know.
Certainly in many categories, like it's all been in phases. It's been decades now since I used to, when I would send money like to my father, because I support my father. When I would send money to him, it'd be like, he'd call me as like, I need more money. And I'm like, oh shoot, okay, I'll send more money. And then there was never the spigot was always open, right? And then over the years, I realized, okay, this doesn't work for me. So I changed it. I said, okay, I'm going to send you a fixed amount. Like, actually, I'm not even going to send you all this money. I'm going to pay for where you're going to live. And then I'm going to send you this fixed amount for you to buy groceries and stuff like that, right? And then I did that. And then I automated that, just like an auto transfer thing. And then I've never done it. And other than like, when I travel there, I'll bring you my gift or, stuff like this. I stopped getting the calls, right? It took an adjustment period. Where
so that transition that you made, I don't know, 10 years ago or something.
That was the oldest, that was one of the first ones but it was like, maybe let's say 15 years.
And that was you emerging out of phase 1 into phase 2.
That's right.
If you catch my drift.
That's right.
But, include emotional giving.
Yeah.
And accommodating, maybe, right? That's generosity.
Yeah.
To accommodate or to allow other people to take up space or to put effort into considering other people's feelings. All of this is generosity and can be challenged when one is being forced to constantly sacrifice yourself for other people. And where are you with that?
I'd say like with, I think my kids were an accelerant in that regard. Because, and I know they're my kids, so like, but hey, I didn't get all of what I provide in terms of that, what you're saying of like that attention, let's say. I really like make an effort to provide my time and my attention, let's say, because I want to, like that. And that's something that I don't do because I want them to love me. I just do it because I really want to do it. Right. So that feels that way. There was one thing I did last year. So my mom had never been to a concert. She goes to classical, like symphony and operas and things, but she's never been to a pop concert in her life. And she loves Taylor Swift. And Taylor Swift tickets are very expensive.
Yeah.
But I decided that she should see a pop concert before she goes.
How much was the ticket?
Oh man, I think after all the billions of expense or taxes and all this stuff, I think I paid like $1,200.
Oh, for some reason, I mean that's still fucking expensive.
Oh, it's very expensive.
But I was like, are we talking like $5,000? Because
no, I wouldn't have done it at that level.
Because some of the tickets were more than that.
Yeah, this wasn't like front row, but it was a good ticket. You know, but still $1,200, or it may have been $1,500. Like I remember when I paid $250 for a Paul McCartney ticket when he was 64.
Yeah.
At the Kingdom, or no, not Kingdom, at the Key Arena, and I was crying tears of green. I was like, oh, my money. But Paul McCartney, that was $250.
Yeah.
I pissed $250 every month.
Yeah, tickets are out of control.
That's crazy.
They're completely outpacing anything close to inflation.
But my point was that one is an example of like, I really felt, I'm like, you know what? I want to do something nice for my mom. She might never get another pop concert.
So that's a good example because how do you know the difference for the listeners between giving that gift to your mom, who is, this is an important relationship that very much relates to what we're talking about here. Yeah. How do you know it comes from you and not from a place of fear or desperation for approval?
Right. Okay. So I'm ad hocing this, but I'd say maybe three buckets here. The first one is, as it pertains to the specific relationship, in this case, my mom, we're no longer at a place where I am, how do I say this? I am afraid that she's going to leave me. and because, the background for the listener, if they don't know, like when I was little, my parents separated and she left and I was left with my dad. And so I lost my mom for years before I moved in with her again. And even after that, I spent easily a decade, 2 decades subconsciously fearing abandonment still. But through therapy and through having a family and through her, honestly, I'm not going to say that she did enough like therapy maybe, but she did do some. But honestly, being there for my kids and for me as my mom all these years, it has had a healing level, right? So I'm no longer at a point where I'm still constantly, because there was a period of my life, maybe even as early as 10 years ago still, where I would feel rage.
Yeah.
About my mom's. I'm not there now, right? Number one. Number two. So that's the first one.
Because you did the work outside and inside of therapy.
Right. Now, that's never going to go 100% away, but it's night and day. So that's the first one. The second one is my own situation is one where I'm not like, well, darn it, we may not be able to eat next month, but I can afford this. No, I have the abundance right now, luckily, that I can say.
It doesn't feel like you're harming your family.
Exactly. This was a planned, I'm like, okay, this is that. So that was the second. And then the third one was that the reason I wanted to do it was for her happiness. I want to I want to see her smile and have her. And I didn't even go to the concert, by the way.
It's not hoping to get her to love you and accept you.
No, I just wanted her to be happy. And it was great because she went and she had the time of her life. And that made me so happy, that I could give a gift like that to someone. Yeah. But that one, and then I guess maybe there's a corollary, which is I always knew I had done one of the wrong ones because I would always regret my actions, right? And this always only felt good.
If you gave out of fear, or hope for approval, later you would regret it.
And not even that much later. Sometimes like that night or the day after or whatever. And this is something that actually I'll just look fondly to this experience. Okay. And so that's one example.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a big one, right? Because it's not a trivial amount of money.
Yeah.
And it's with one of my key relationships that I would have been at risk for doing exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think you demonstrated well.
Yeah.
Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle, in which we talked about 4 or 5 extremely light, non-controversial topics. And until next time, everyone, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.